Well, those are a lot of uncertainties to deal with. What would you do? I think the first thing, sort of at the low end of the spectrum of difficulty, would be start talking with Russia and China, not just about how many nuclear weapons they have, but whether they'd be willing to work with us at all. And they may not. I suspect they won't, but be worth testing them to come up with a set of country neutral sanctions in advance for any state that might want to withdraw and say, look, if you withdraw, here's what's going to happen to you. So maybe you might want to reconsider withdrawing in the first place. There is going to be a nuclear non-proliferation treaty review conference next year. I don't know that it'll make it on the agenda. I know it privately was on the agenda. It needs to be publicly on the agenda, I would think. Next slide. This also is kind of a low-hanging item. Make Fizzle production an arms control topic, again, with Moscow and Beijing. And besides arguing about freezing or declaring warhead numbers, why don't we declare what the Fizzle holdings are? In our case, it's easy. We've already done it. They haven't. I think in addition, right now, South Korea is not funding its pyroprocessing, and Japan is delaying Rokasho. I now heard it's now 2023. Well, maybe we should ask China to suspend its reprocessing and fast reactor programs. And oh, by the way, we can offer to do so as well, because those things are not economic at all. I mean, they make nuclear power look like too cheap to meter in comparison. The regular nuclear power looks very cheap compared to fast reactors, probably about half as expensive. And I think we ought to take the idea that we're telling the Saudis and the UAE to do, which is don't reprocess or enrich, and suggest that everyone in the Middle East ought to buy off on that. Just a thought. Okay, next slide. Let's see here. The third thing, which I think is getting very poor attention, is the United States should stop pushing nuclear energy abroad, certainly in the name of national security, or even, to clean the air of carbon. These arguments are not quite right. They're not quite right for a number of reasons. First, when you build reactors in the Middle East, more often than not, they get shot at. And so you really do not want to build reactors in the Middle East unless you are willing to entertain someone bombing it. This has happened 13 times since the late 70s. This is not theory, this is practice. And the missile age is going to make targeting reactors even more likely. It's already been threatened explicitly in the Armenian-Azeri conflict, most recent this year. The Houthis don't quite have the range with their large Scud-like missiles, but they have claimed they are aiming at the UAE's reactors. We know Dimona is a reactor that Hezbollah would like to hit. You get the picture. Moreover, there are real economic models that not only environmentalists, but more important, nuclear utilities and large electrical utilities use that repeatedly and clearly indicate that if you want to reduce carbon, the cheapest, quickest way tends to be about 11 other things first before you build a new power plant. And so if you're true to being worried about carbon emissions, I won't say that nuclear power plant construction would be the last thing it would do, but it sure wouldn't be the first. We do not talk about those models. They tend to be proprietary. Industry uses them. We need to make those more public and debate what things cost. That would also encourage us to probably have a debate about how various kinds of energy is subsidized, because all of them are, but in different ways. And nuclear, I have to tell you, is got quite a lot of interesting games going on in that regard that need to be added to the actual price, and we need to debate how it compares with other subsidized things and get their costs out. But finally, and much more important, the IEA needs to be more candid about what it can detect early and reliably enough to prevent from being turned into a bomb. And here they just say, well, if we inspect it, that's a safeguard. That's not quite right. By its own definitions, it's got to discover a possible diversion before it becomes a bomb. And in the case of enrichment, reprocessing, and a number of other scenarios, you can't do it. And you need to start being candid about that. We are not doing any of this in our public policy realms on the left or the right. Got to get more serious about this. Next. Here's probably where most of you are most interested. I think we need to determine also what non-nuclear investments we have to make our nuclear and conventional deterrence forces work. We're backing into this brief. I think we're beginning to do it pretty well in the space arena, but not well enough, if you ask me. But I think also we don't seem to talk enough about how to make long-range precise strike systems difficult to target, which ones to use against what. Certainly investments in submersibles are going to be more and more important, as are other unmanned systems. And I think the whole question of how you launch and how cheaply you launch and is going to be very important, not only for space missions, but also simply for a lot of military missions. Finally, it really would be nice if we could get the cost of active defenses down per shot. And we need to really push on what's possible there technically. There are a number of things that are happening in the laser area and other cheap shots per round that need to be emphasized. As well as passive defenses, super hardening, and the rest. All of this doesn't tend to get dialed into the discussion. I think we need to do it.